How is everybody feeling today? That's pretty good. How's everybody feeling today? That's much better. I love that you have been at like 7 panels, my friend. You're awesome. You are awesome. Okay, so a couple of things. Is there any flash photography allowed at this panel? You're right. Is there any video allowed at this panel? Thank you guys for knowing that. That means a lot to me. Okay, so I got to put my drink down. Don't worry. There may or may not be alcohol in that. It means nothing to you. It's allergies. It's for allergies. Okay, so this is kind of a big deal. Before our guests come out on stage, I just want to say this. So one of our partners in Nerd HQ and somebody that's been a great friend to ours is Intel. And just before I came on stage, they told me this. We have 6 panels left, including this. We have Damon and Seth. Then right after that, we have Grimm. And then right after that, we have Doctor Who. All right, anybody going to any of those panels, by the way? Awesome. And tomorrow, we have Nathan Fillion's second panel. We have Jared Padalecki's panel. And then we'll have my panel at the end of the day. That was the correct response. So 6 panels, each one of those, by the way, they're all sold out. So that means $5,000 per panel, roughly, right? So that's $30,000, right? No, yes, $30,000. So what Intel said is this. If you guys hashtag Intel Comic-Con moments, can you remember that? What? Send a picture. You can be, you know what? Make it a picture of me. I'll feel great about it. Or whatever you want to do. Just whatever, tweet something with a hashtag of Intel Comic-Con moment. Because if you do, if you do or you don't, whatever, please do. But by me just saying that, by telling you guys and encouraging you to do that, Intel has offered to match every single dollar that we raise for the next 6 panels, which means another $30,000 on top of that. So please do that. Please do that. All right. Where did somebody stole my drink. Oh, it doesn't matter. Okay, so here we go. Oh, by the way, you guys raised $5,000 for this charity. Way to go. All right, yes, I'm going. So, without any further ado, to answer all of your burning questions, of which I'm sure there are many, please welcome to the stage Damon Lindelof and Seth Graham Smith. Damon and Seth, everybody. Damon and Seth.
Hi, guys. How are you? As promised, Seth and I have been drinking for the last, I'd say, 2 hours, conservatively. And
we haven't been drinking conservatively, but 2 hours is a conservative estimate.
Correct. And we've both been attendees of the San Diego Comic-Con for many, many years. I first came down in 2003 or 2004, I think, as a fan, and I would wait in these huge long lines, and then in 2004 we showed the Lost pilot, and then suddenly, thank you very much, had this very surreal experience of being kind of spinal tapped in through the back, and being on the stage and experiencing things from the other side. And I think that Hall H is a wonderful place. We've all been there. We all dig it. But I think that obviously an opportunity like this to be in a smaller, more intimate setting with you guys provides a certain opportunity for honesty and intimacy. And we're really just here to tell some stories that we probably haven't told before, and answer any questions that you guys may have. Don't be afraid to get combative.
Why would they get combative?
Just don't be afraid to. We will take our shirts off and go Tyler Durden style if necessary, with each other, not with you. But it just, when Zach and these guys invited us down, and again, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for buying tickets for this panel. It's an amazing cause, Operation Smile, so thanks to all of you for doing that.
So, Damon.
Yes, Seth?
How was your summer?
Well, it's been a very complicated summer. I would say one of the things that that we should probably both talk about. I think that we've both told our stories in terms of how, in your case, Seth had 2 movies come out this summer: Dark Shadows and Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Both of which I genuinely liked.
Wow. Are you a critic for Rotten Tomatoes? I could have used you.
And I had a movie called Prometheus that I worked on. Thank you. And yet, I'm only looking at the people who aren't clapping. We're going to talk a little bit about that too. But we kind of want to talk a little bit about the process of what it's like for us as fanboys to suddenly get your dream opportunity, and what that's like, and how we ended up in the places that we ended up. So I guess, again, to answer your question, it's been a complicated summer because, first off, there's going to be no bitching from us whatsoever. We feel like the
Two of the luckiest guys in the world up here.
And that's not just lip service. I mean, it's a very surreal.
No, we were
experience.
extraordinarily lucky.
Yeah, but on the other side of luck is that that we are and always will look at ourselves as fans, and therefore we are simply incapable of ignoring what our fellow fans are saying about the stuff that we're doing. And so the idea that all we care about is how much a movie makes or how it does on Rotten Tomatoes can completely, my entire day will be shaped by whatever whatever's happening on my Twitter feed.
The first tweet of the morning is always a...
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up one, that my first tweet of this morning, a little bit later. But I figured that before we open up the floor for these guys, maybe you could just talk a little bit about, you wrote a novel, and a novel is as pure of a vision as is possible from a writer. It's just basically you, and it was very successful. It almost created this new genre unto itself, and then you were given the opportunity to adapt it yourself. And can you talk a little bit about that process, just how it all occurred?
Sure. Well, I mean, I had written Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, and thank you very much. So people were suddenly interested in what I had to write next in terms of books, and I had this 50-page proposal that I had put together before PBZ came out, which was for this, axe-wielding, vampire-hunting president. And so I got a chance to write that as a book, and during the writing of the book, late into the process of writing the first draft of that manuscript, all of a sudden my phone rings and someone says, Tim Burton wants to meet with you about Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, which, is one of those calls you never forget, and it's one of those strange, surreal, I don't know. So we met, we sat down for the first time on the day that Michael Jackson died, that's apropos of nothing, but that's why I remember, I remember leaving the meeting and someone running and saying, Tim, Michael Jackson died, which made a surreal afternoon that much more surreal for me, but...
Did Tim cry?
He did, he wept.
He did? Yeah.
He wept for the memory of Michael.
What was Tim wearing?
You really?
Yes.
He was wearing a black t-shirt, black blazer, black jeans, black shoes, and Ray-Bans. And we were inside.
I could have guessed that.
Yeah. So, all of a sudden I was given an opportunity to adapt a novel that hadn't even come out yet for Tim Burton and for Timur Bekmambetov, the director of Wanted. And so I had never been paid money to write a feature film screenplay before. And so this was a huge opportunity for me. And so before the book came out, I started to meet with Timur and with another producer, Jim Lemley, about the story and everything. And we would sit and talk about, okay, so now that the book exists, what are we going to do for the movie? And it was a strange question because I said, well, what do you mean? The book is the book. It's there. It's all there. All I have to do is just cut some things out, and there we go. And that began an 18-month, 21 draft process of, changing and changing and changing. And what I came to realize is, when you write a book, like you said, it's as pure a distillation of the writer's voice as you can get. It is you just sort of canoeing down the river of your own mind and having a telepathic conversation with your reader. When you are writing a movie, no matter if it's your own book you're adapting or adapting someone else's book or just writing your own story, you are in service of the director's vision. And not only that, you have to contend with studio input, producer input, actors who have ideas and things they don't like and do like. And, it never occurs to you these things when you're writing your screenplay. And so it was a huge eye-opening experience for me, as was Dark Shadows, by the way.
And so do you feel that there was a point where this thing that you wrote by yourself, and now it's suddenly into the ether, they're making a big movie with it, you're working with 800-pound gorillas like Tim and Timur, that it stops becoming yours?
Well, the reality is it stops becoming yours the minute you say yes and take the job, because you're a screenwriter. And, you can be David Koepp, you can be a huge, powerful screenwriter, but even David Koepp is in service of a director's vision. And so what you have to become is a collaborator. You have to become open to ideas and open to different interpretations of your work, of your ideas. And, for me, I reached a point where it was turning into something else. And I've never told this story before. I'll probably get in trouble for telling it, but...
Tell it.
But...
By the way, I love the way that you hold the mic. I mean, I'm just sort of becoming very self-conscious of, I'm holding it in a very demure fashion.
Yeah.
You've got a good grip on it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm planning on dropping it at the end of the thing.
Okay.
Just walking out stage, Chris Rock style. But so Timur I love Timur. He's a wonderful man. He's a pain in my ass as a director sometimes. And as a writer, he challenges you. And believe me, I say this all with love. I love Timur, the person. Timur, the director, is so brilliant visually, and he's such an idea factory that the ideas come at you like bullets and you're Neo in the Matrix, and trying to catch the brilliant ones.
Could you do that again, please?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay.
So the ideas kept coming and coming and coming. Now, I had written a draft of the script in September of 2010 that, that was the draft that got Fox to buy the movie, to greenlight the movie. It made the blacklist. I was feeling really good about myself, People were saying, wow, this crazy, dumb genre movie is actually better than it should be. And that's the point of everything that I try to do, is taking ridiculous genre ideas and trying to do them better than they deserve to be executed. But after that September draft, the movie continued to change. And at a certain point in January, I said, I don't know if I can go with this. I don't even know how to do this particular change that you're asking me to do. And, at that point, I left the project. And, it's no secret, like Simon Kinberg's name is on the poster with me as a writer, even though it's not in the movie, because you arbitrate with the Guild, and the Guild decides right before the movie comes out who gets credit and everything. Just like you did with John Spates. We can get to that in a second.
We shall.
I like Simon tremendously. He's a great guy. He's a great writer. And he came on and tried to keep up with those changes that were going on during production. And so by the time the movie was shot, I wasn't there while they were shooting the movie. And by the time the movie was shot, I came back, they screened the movie for it, and there were things I liked about it and things I didn't. It was clearly different in a lot of ways. And then I stayed on through the end of post, sort of, writing new scenes and sort of reasserting my voice in the movie and everything. But, ultimately, it's no secret. You can't just, you can't ignore the fact that you have a score in the 30s on Rotten Tomato and that your movie is going to limp to $40 million. And you can't ignore that. You can't just ignore the fact that that's kind of a failure. And so for me, it was just a huge learning experience in ways that I still don't even quite understand, because I have a company and I produce things and you produce things and it was, I don't know what I would do differently if I had to do it all over again is the thing, because I was so happy to be in the process the whole time until I wasn't. Yeah. But my question, I mean, so, you know, the point is, when you're a writer and you're writing, a television show like on Lost, you and Carlton were basically like the kings. You know, you were the final say, and of course you guys had to deal with the network. But ultimately, TV is a writer's medium, and books are a writer's medium. Film, however, is a director's medium, and a lot of people don't understand the distinction. And you know, that's not to say that writers are blameless when a film goes wrong. Writers deserve a lot of the blame when a film goes wrong, but filmmaking is a group effort in a way that even television isn't. Because you have someone at the top through whom you're distilling something. But my experience was different than yours on Prometheus, because on Prometheus, you came in and there was a script, yes, and a script by John Spates, who you share credit with on the movie. And,
correct,
and
yep.
What I was curious about is how much of what we ended up seeing in Prometheus was there in that original script.
I think in order to get the most honest, well-rounded answer, you'd have to ask John the same question. But from my vantage point, I got a phone call in much the same way that you got about Tim, which is Ridley Scott is going to call you in your car, and for me, there's going to be no point in my life where I get a call like that, and I'm just like, oh, okay, great. I completely and totally lost my brain and was really nervous about it. And Ridley Scott, he doesn't, he knows that you know that he's Ridley Scott, so he calls up and he's not like, there's no formal introduction. You're like, hello, and he's not like, oh, hello, I'm Ridley Scott. Perhaps you are familiar with my body of work, He's just like, hey, dude.
You've seen The Duelist.
Yeah, right. I'm sending you a script, and let me know what you think. And this is the way that a lot of rewrites start, which is it's a test. They don't tell you anything. They send you the script, and you read it, and you're supposed to sort of intuit, okay, clearly they're sending this to me because it's not where they want it to be, but they're going to give you no guidance whatsoever as to whatever issues that they have with it. And you don't know if it's coming from the director, you don't know if it's coming from the studio. So they sent a guy over to my house. He handed me a script. He said, I'll wait outside while you read it. I read it. It was called Alien Zero. And I'd been hearing the same thing that probably most of the people in this room had, which is that Ridley Scott was developing an Alien prequel. And that's what John Spates was hired to do, and that's what John Spates did. So by page, I think like 30 or 35 of Alien Zero, the characters experience eggs, and the eggs open up, and facehuggers come out of the eggs and stick to people's faces, and then they fall off, and then chest bursters come out of their bodies, and then they grow up to be xenomorphs, and the xenomorphs go and kill everybody. And so I read this, but there was one idea in that script, which was, what if the space jockey that we all knew from the original movie was not some crazy alien, but was in fact humanoid? And let's go one step further and say, what if that creature is responsible for perhaps creating mankind? And so that was in there. That was in the Spates draft. And when I read that, at first, as a fan, I was like, this is bullshit. Like, I do not like this because it is retcon. Like, it's retcon because when Ridley Scott shot Alien in 1979, or whenever it was that he first developed that script, he was not thinking that the space jockey was a humanoid progenitor of all humankind, and therefore I cry foul. But the more that I thought of it, the more that I thought, like, this is the idea that I'm really gravitating towards, because it's ballsy, and it is going to alienate people, no pun intended. And the fact that I'm thinking about it and struggling with it, and I'm not sure whether I like it or not, is kind of the thing that drives me creatively. And so the other thing that really that jumped out from what John had done was the idea that there was this android in the on the journey called David, and and I was like, okay, we have this opportunity now for, here's an android, he's created by humans, and the humans are going in search of their creator, but the android is very, very unimpressed with his creators, and maybe there's, I'm really driven by that character. So I sent an email that night, basically, to Ridley and his producers, Michael Ellenberg and Michael Costigan, saying, I want to spend a lot of time on David, and I want to flip the script so that it's, right now, John's draft is, I'd say, like 70% alien mythology, all the stuff that we're familiar with, 30% this new idea, this creation idea. I'm going to flip it so that it's 70% the creation idea, 30% the alien idea, and that's what I would do to this. And then they said, do you want to come in? And I was, yes, I do. And I came in, and I met Ridley Scott. He was naked. Which is something that he does, I guess. It's strange.
All right, yeah.
Just a, naked. He wears a sword, too, because he's a knight. And you just have to pretend like he's not naked and wearing a sword.
Yep.
And if you can get through that meeting. So I pitched all this stuff, and it turned out that the big, one of the...
Does Charlize work the same way?
Yeah. With a sword and completely naked?
Naked with a sword?
Unfortunately
that's a damn
not.
shame, okay.
But they were at an impasse on the script because I thought Ridley Scott, science fiction, alien universe, they're going to make this movie. But they were at a point in the development where Fox wasn't sure whether they wanted to make it, and Ridley was ready to, he's developing 9 or 10 different projects as a producer.
Well, and we as fans were also reading, like, this is in trouble. Ridley won't do it unless he can do it for $250 million or something like,
Right.
There was a lot of gossip about it, and then you came on, and all of a sudden...
Sure, and now we get to, again, I take all responsibility for all the work that I did. That being said, I was a complete and total sellout because I was being hired to realize Ridley Scott's vision. And anything that guy tells me, I'm going to figure out a way to give him exactly what he wants. That was my job. That was the way that I saw my job. So he and I don't think he was used to working this way, and this was more of a TV approach. But I said to him, once they officially hired me, we're going to sit in a room until you're sick of me, and I'm just going to pepper you with questions, and I'm going to try to get a sense of what it is you like about this movie and what it is you want to do. And then I'm going to transcribe that, and I'm going to put it on paper so that when you read it, it's going to feel like you wrote it, because that's my job. I'm a sous chef. It's not my job to make the menu. It's my job to execute your dish. Now, there were points in that process where I didn't understand something, or I didn't like something, or I was passionate about something that he didn't like, and there was a discourse there. And sometimes he gave, and sometimes I gave. But ultimately, it's his movie, 100%, and it's his world, the world that he created. So I was enormously proud of all the work that I did, but at the same time, I emailed John as soon as I got the job, because this is a very weird thing about what you and I do.
Yeah.
And writers very rarely talk about it, but this idea that if you go and see a movie, for example, Cowboys and Aliens, which I was one of 7 credited writers on, it's a very strange thing to basically say, like, here's a child, it was raised by 8 different parents, none of them ever met each other, and each one of them has radically different parenting styles. That kid's gonna be a fucking nightmare. Like, they're gonna be very confused, like, about how they're supposed to behave and what TV they can watch and all that stuff. So I reached out to John, and he was really...
Or what the aliens are fucking doing there.
Yeah, exactly. And
sorry, that's just personal.
I reached out to John, and I said, look, this is an uncomfortable situation. They've basically hired me to come in and work on your script, and I just want you to know that all the work that I'm doing is honoring, I think, the work that you did, and hopefully, when all is said and done, you'll be really proud that your name is on it. And he said, thanks for sending this, but he felt the same way that I would have felt in that situation, which is, why didn't you just ask me to do it?
Right.
And I think a lot of the time, it's just, again, to go to the kid or the family metaphor, for those of us in this room who are married, and I love my wife and I want to be with my wife for the rest of my life, but there are times on any given day where you're basically like, fuck this, I'm just going to marry somebody else. But in movies, they do. Like, they're just like, oh, well, this scene didn't turn out the way that I wanted to. Instead of going back to Seth or Damon and saying, take another stab at it, I'm just going to fucking fire them and bring in somebody else.
Right.
And as a writer, you have the choice as to whether or not you're going to do your best version of the scene or whether or not you're going to be replaced.
Well, that brings up one last thing that I want to say before we open up to questions and people yelling at us about how we fucked up their movies. It's perfectly fine. We expect it. You and I, during, we've had meals before, we've sat down, we've talked about process and gotten to know each other a little bit. And one of the things we talk about, I think one of the things we have in common is that we deeply give a shit, deeply, about, what people think about our work. And so, the title of this panel is The Art of Being Despised, that's a tongue-in-cheek way of saying, we hear you. Like, we know that there was deep unhappiness with our movies this summer on some levels. And we're kind of here to own it and say, all right, tell us and we'll tell you and we'll have a conversation about it. But we care about what we do. And what we were just saying when we were having one of our many drinks a minute ago was every time, unless you're a fucking hack, every time you start a project or write a script or a television pilot or whatever it is, or a book, you want it to be an A+. You want this to be the one they remember you for. And you pour yourself into it. And then things happen, like you have a crisis in your life while you're writing the book, and that drains away some of the energy, and so the book ends up being, 75% of what you hoped it would be. Or you deal with a studio, whether it's in television or films, that, just will not meet you halfway in what you were trying to do. Or you have an actor who comes into a movie that you've written a certain way and interprets the character a completely different way. Some of these things are in your control, but a lot of them are out of your control. And this is not, I don't want this to be about Seth and Damon running away from their responsibility for their work. It's not that. I take responsibility for the things that I screwed up. But
can you also take responsibility for the things that I screwed up? Because I just feel like
I don't know if I have that much bandwidth.
It would alleviate.
I've seen what some of your Twitter followers say. It's amazing, by the way, to wake up and literally read a tweet that says, "Please kill yourself." Right. I mean, we've both
and they said, "Please,
please." Yeah.
Like,
well, as long as they're being polite, I guess. I mean, what's funny is that it instilled like such vitriol, in certain segments of the population. Like, people truly get angry. And what I can promise you is that because we are the people who let it really hurt us, and we are the people who really care about it and really want it to be good and are very upset with ourselves when it's not as good as we hoped, nobody that is tweeting us or, no one who's going to ask us a question or give us a comment today is as hard on Damon and Seth as Damon and Seth are.
Right, and the cold hard reality of those tweets is that they have impact because there is truth in them. When I read something like that, if I was like, oh my God, Prometheus is the most amazing movie that I've ever written, and it's perfectly perfect in every way, that stuff would be completely and totally powerless. But when you read something like that, and it's
it gets to the heart of what you are already thinking yourself, which is, I could have done better.
Right, and also, I'm sure that there are a lot of writers in this room, or a lot of creators in this room, and there is sort of this fundamental aspect of fear that exists in our writing. It's one of the things that really hamstrings us. And when one of the most insanely and contradictorily depressed periods of my life was right after the Lost pilot aired, and over 20 million people watched it, because that idea of like, I'm going to fail spectacularly, that nightmare that I've been having about walking out onto a stage naked and everybody laughing at me, this is even worse than that. Because,
it's not too late. We're all right here.
Yeah, I need another cocktail.
Yeah.
So that's going to happen eventually, and the idea that it's going to happen and that there's nothing I can do about it now is completely terrifying. And so in that first season of the show, the thing that kept coming back at us was like, are you making this up as you go along? And we're going to be really unsatisfied with the ending. And although that's exactly what happened for a lot of people who sort of prescribed that, although that wasn't entirely my feeling, it rang true when I heard that criticism, and it's impossible for me to ignore it. And one of the things that really sticks with me, and not to sort of shift over onto another filmmaker, but I don't know how many of you guys have seen the Red Letter Media stuff of the prequels. They're really genius sort of deconstructions, and one of the things that they did was they pulled stuff off the Phantom Menace DVD, the behind the scenes, and George is just talking to a bunch of guys about laser swords, and they're all sitting nodding, and not a single person goes, George, they're called fucking lightsabers. Like, you know, and the idea that I could ever become that removed from the voice of the fans, and at the end of the day, I'm writing this stuff for me. That's the reality. Any writer who says like, hey man, it's all for you guys. We love you guys. We want you guys to love our stuff. But it's all through the conduit of, we're you. Like, this stuff is, we'd be sitting in this crowd right now if we weren't sitting in front of this crowd, and many of you in this room will one day be on a stage like this, and it's a very trippy experience. That being said, it's impossible for me to ignore the haters, because the minute that I do, I kind of feel like I'm completely and totally cutting myself off from the reason that I started doing this in the first place.
And I always tell people, you know, when I'm speaking to people at like book readings or whatever, everybody always asks, you know,
why did you ruin your own book?
Why did you ruin your own book, you fucking sellout? Yeah. Well,
what's the answer? What's the answer to that question? Why did you ruin your own book?
I just felt like it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, at the time. Right. It was just a lot easier than making my own book awesome.
Yeah, it was just easier than doing a good job, you know. Who wants to do a good job? But people always ask, you know, what advice do you have for aspiring writers? And, you know, my first answer is persistence, because, you know, people consider me like, oh, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, he's, you know, an overnight success. Well, I wrote specs and books and everything I could possibly sit and write for 11 years before anyone paid me for it. And, you know, was out in LA basically, you know, doing odd jobs trying to be a writer and trying to get better at my craft.
Is that code for sex?
Yes.
Odd jobs?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is.
Huh.
But
or throwing your hat at people.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Oh.
Bond fans?
Yeah.
No?
Oh.
Thank you.
But you know, that's what I'm still trying to do, is trying to get better at what I do, is trying to get better at writing and trying to, you know, grow as a writer always. There was a point, and I've completely forgotten what it was. But the other, you know, shit, I really forgot what the point was, and it was really good.
You'll come back to it. Let's open it up. Like,
yeah, please.
This is all about talking to you guys.
Can I just say really quick? I just want to say really quick, because I've been fascinated by this. How many people here are actually aspiring writers? Are many aspiring writers? People aspiring to be in entertainment? Show of hands there. No, just general fans. Fantastic. Okay, I shit you not, and that's only the second time I've shit. Okay, that's 3 times now. This is one of the most honest, genuinely, one of the most honest conversations you will ever have with any 2 men on any stage. They are burying themselves here right now. I mean that. I just wanted to point that out. You guys, really, you should go back and watch this video later, because you're learning a lot, especially if you want to be a writer. Okay, now let's go to the questions from the audience.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I just like to thank both of you guys for coming out, and Damon especially, Lost was my favorite show. And
thank you.
Really the reason I started watching television again, just hooked me right in. And I heard a rumor that there may be a new Lost show soon, so I just wanted to ask, is there any truth to that? Are we going back to the island?
I personally, at this point in the game, don't want to revisit the island personally. That being said, I sort of think I would completely and totally embrace the idea of them trying to relaunch it in some sort of interesting way. I think it's a little too soon now, but 5 years from now, I mean, who in this room wouldn't watch The X-Files, written by an entirely new creative team, that did their own spin on Mulder and Scully, maybe with those characters, maybe it's 2 new characters coming in, but I think that it's completely hypocritical for me to say one of the greatest and most rewarding creative experiences of my life was working on the Star Trek movie that came out in 2009 with, thanks. And like, what's great about these properties is Lost isn't mine anymore. It's not Carlton's, and it's not the writers, and it's not the actress who was in it. It's all of ours. And so the idea that someone in this room, or someone who's down at the con, or someone who's living in the Philippines right now basically says, I want to write my fanfic Lost. And if that's good, then I want to see that shit. Like, so it's like, I feel like I had everything that I had to say about that show kind of came out in that show, and there's themes that I obviously gravitate back to over and over again, for better or for worse. But right now, I do feel like it would be kind of sad if I was like, oh, I'm going back to Lost. Like, I kind of it's sort of like Michael Jordan playing for the Wizards. Does that joke even play here? It does? Thanks.
Who's next? Who's got the power? Who's got the microphone?
Does that work? I have to stand up? You guys are like fucking rock stars. I like how you say fuck without the censorship.
Yeah.
This is great. I like it. I'm liking it.
Yeah, take that, society.
I have a question about your Jin and Jin's wife episode. I always wondered this, because how come you have them speak in Korean and not English? I feel like I'm watching a foreign film, and it's kind of frustrating, and I don't know what the heck they're saying.
Well, I think that Jin and Sun, we made the decision it was such a huge plot point in the first season that she secretly had learned English, and he didn't. And that would radically flip their dynamics. So when we first meet them, essentially, he's the domineering husband. To suddenly say, now that she's the only one who can communicate with the other castaways, he's suddenly going to be forced into a position of change. And so the only way to do that was by having them speak in their native tongue. And when we wrote that script, which was the 6th hour, I think, of the show to air, the network was like, we're a little bit concerned about all the subtitles. And we were like, we're a little bit concerned about it too, but concern can be a good thing, and if it doesn't work, we'll minimize it in the future, but having them speak English is going to completely and totally sort of screw up that dynamic. In the case of Saeed, for example, we did what we called the Hunt for Red October gag, which is Sean Connery is like, there's no fucking way I'm going to learn Russian. So they push in on his lips, and he's speaking Russian, and then they pant, and then they come out, and then he's speaking English. So we would do that for Saeed. But I think because it was such a character gag for them, you just had to sit through it and read it is the answer.
Who has the mic? This man right here.
Hi, Damon. My question is about Star Trek. I want to know, it's not a combative question. I want to know what you felt like you had to change in the new film to make it work for a new generation.
That's a very insightful question, and I think that the answer is not much. I think that Star Trek, there was a feeling around it that it was not for you. Like, if you were, like, for me, it was always for me, but if you weren't into Trek, it was sort of one of those things like Comic-Con, where it's like you either get it or you don't get it. And for us, it was really about saying, is there any presentation of this without betraying its core values that makes people feel like it's for them? And on a completely, totally superficial level, it's about presenting some version of an origin story where you're not really hamstrung by a lot of mythology and backstory, although the movie ended up being, because we also said there's no way to do this without having a handoff from Nimoy, from the original Spock. If we were to say that none of that ever happened, the original series never happened, then the hardcore Trekkies who had been, or Trekkers who had been following it for 40 years, they would feel betrayed too. So, again...
And yet you destroyed Vulcan, you son of a bitch!
We did, but It had to be done. It had to be gone.
We were all thinking it. Vulcan had to go.
Hi. Firstly, I just wanted to say to Damon, thank you for like everything you've written, pretty much. I came from England basically to see you, so this means a lot to me.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I had two questions. I wanted to know whether you enjoyed the process more of writing for TV or films. I know you're going to start writing for TV again soon, which is amazing, because I love Lost. And secondly, I wanted to know if I could give you this picture that I drew.
I'll take the second part first and say
Okay.
yes. And the first part, there's a little bit of a grass is greener scenario, which is, oh, and by the way, we will be, oh, wow.
Wow, you drew that?
I look so
Let the people see.
serious and handsome. This is really awesome. Can
Wow.
you guys see that? That's beautiful.
It's really good.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thanks, wow. What's your name? Mel, thank you very much. She was my favorite Spice Girl, by the way. Mel B. The grass is always greener. So when I was doing Lost, when we were doing Lost, it was 70 hours a week. We did 121 hours of the show. That's all I did for 6 years. If it hadn't been for the writer's strike, I probably wouldn't have even worked on Trek. And so I was always like, oh my God, I just want to do movies. All my friends who are doing movies,
We were having so much fun.
so much fun with the smoking and the parties and the sex.
So much sex for the writers.
They were just living the life of Riley. So that's all I wanted to do. And then when Lost ended, I got the opportunity to work on, obviously, some incredible films. But I do feel like one of the things that I gave up was a degree of sort of creative authorship from start to finish. And so Lost ended just a little bit over 2 years ago. And right around 6 months ago or 7 months ago, I was like, I really want to go back to TV. So, but I didn't know what the idea was going to be. And I read this book called The Leftovers that was written by this guy, Tom Perrotta, who also wrote Little Children and Election. He's an amazing writer, but and traditionally not a genre writer, but I read this book review written by Stephen King, who I'm obsessed with, who basically loved this book, and I was like, if Stephen King loves this book, I've got to read it. And I read it, and it completely and totally fired all of my creative energies. So I wanted to get the book, but it had already been optioned by HBO. And so I had to let my deal at ABC expire, but Tom and I are now writing that pilot right as we speak. I mean, not now on the stage, but we start in earnest over the course of the next couple of weeks. We'll turn in a draft sometime around Labor Day, and then if HBO likes it, we'll make a pilot, and if all goes well, I'll have a new TV show. So that's the ambition.
Before we take another question, I mean, one thing that we have not discussed is our mutual love of Stephen King.
Yes.
I don't know. I think Stephen King probably thinks I'm a hack or a joke or something if he even knows that I exist. But what's interesting is I meet a lot of genre writers like Damon, like others, who when you talk for 2 minutes about your influences, and invariably Stephen King comes up. My dad was a used and rare book dealer when I was growing up in Connecticut, and we had 5,000, no exaggeration, volumes of science fiction, fantasy, and horror in our basement. And my gifts from my father when I was growing up were first edition Stephen King books, hardcovers and everything. So starting from the age of 11 or 12, I really started to digest all this, and until I was about 18, I didn't read anything but King. I mean, I read like Asimov and Heinlein and Bradbury especially, but really King was just and it's interesting. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't mean anything, but so many genre writers in film, television, and novels that are roughly our age, because we're a few years apart, but we're roughly the same age, were influenced by King. And I just as much as I can, I try to put that out there, only because I think that he obviously sold enough books. He doesn't need our endorsement or anything, but I just don't think he gets critically his due yet in terms of, I mean, he does at Comic-Con. I mean, people know that. But
And when you, by the way, what's your favorite Stephen King book?
my favorite Stephen King
So
book.
let's just both, so we don't copy each other. On three, we'll both
Okay,
say.
so 1, 2, 3. Is this like the Lethal Weapon 2 scene with the toilet? We go on 3 or 3,
I'll say
and then
1,
we go.
1, 2, 3, and then we will say.
Okay,
it.
ready?
1, 2, 3.
It.
The Stand.
Oh. All right.
Okay.
So we both like the 1,000+, you know,
Sure.
the super.
Yes.
Now, total plug and total self-serving plug. I am producing it at Warner Brothers with Cary Fukunaga directing and writing.
I will be there.
We're doing it as 2 movies. We're doing the Cary Fukunaga and Chase Palmer are writing it. Cary's going to direct it. We're doing it for Warner Brothers as 2 movies. First, the children's story, and then the 26 years later story.
Awesome.
With the adults. So that is a dream come true for me. And I want, you know, I think that every Stephen King story deserves the Darabont treatment
Yes.
in film. And that's one of the goals that I have for my career.
And I just want to, I want to share this brief anecdote about Stephen King because I only have one, which I might have told before, but and then we'll give it back to you guys. But I think between the 2nd and 3rd season of Lost, Stephen King wrote an op-ed for Entertainment Weekly, and his op-ed basically was titled "Stop Wagon Training." And he was a fan of the show, but he, growing up, was a fan of the show called Wagon Train. And it drove him nuts because he knew the wagon train could never get to California, because if it did, the show would be over. And we used that. We had been lobbying fairly actively by the end of the 1st season to end the show. And King's piece was sort of Exhibit A for the network in terms of, hey, look, Stephen King says it too. Like, he's legit. So Entertainment Weekly flew JJ, Carlton, and I out to Bangor.
Oh, you son of a bitch.
Yeah. And we had this sit down with King, and I got him to sign my I got him to sign my first edition Gunslinger, and we had this very sort of like candid conversation about Lost, where he was like, here are the things that I like, but here are the things where I feel like things are starting to drag, and it was like, oh my God, Stephen King like watches our show. This is the most amazing thing ever. So anyway, and he was like, the whole deal was we were going to Bangor for the day, we were doing this 2-hour meeting with Stephen King, and then we were gonna fly back. And like an hour into the meeting, he was like, hey, do you guys want to see a movie tonight? And we're like, yes, Stephen King, we do want to see a movie. He was like, do you want to see The Descent? We were like, yes, we do want to see The Descent. He was like, well, it's at 7:30, so we'll have to get dinner first. And it's only 3 o'clock now, so let's go to my house. We'll hang out at my house. Then we'll go have dinner, and then we'll go to the movie. So essentially, there were 3 car rides. 1 car ride from his office to his house, 1 car ride from his house to dinner, and then the 3rd one was from dinner to the movie. And so JJ was like, I'm going with him first. And Stephen King drives like a 1977 Pontiac Firebird.
Of course he does.
And so JJ drove with him, and then we all get to King's house, and we're all like, JJ, what did you guys talk about? He's like, I'll tell you later. And then we leave. We hang out at King's house, and then we drive to dinner, and Carlton goes with him to dinner. And I'm like, Carlton, what did you guys talk about? Talk about it later. And so I drive with him from dinner to the movie, and we're driving over there, and we're just like, I'm like, how do I make small talk with fucking Stephen King? And he starts talking about John Grisham, and he's like, man, fucking John Grisham sells more books than I do, and I was like, wow, even Stephen King hates himself a little bit. But so I look down at my feet in the car, and I pick up this lottery, a scratch-off lottery ticket.
What?
And I go, is this yours? And he goes, you never know when you're gonna get lucky.
What the? That is amazing. I cannot top that.
All right, questions?
One more question. When he first found out that we were producing it, we got word from the Stephen King people that Mr. King would like to meet the filmmakers and discuss it. And so I think here's my big chance. And this is not going anywhere. It's not nearly as good as this story. But basically, I said, oh my God, we're going to go to Bangor. We're going to go to where he has the bats on the fence, and I've seen it. I've actually Google Street Viewed his house because I'm such a you know, I can't believe I'm actually going to meet Stephen King. I hope he likes me. And they're like, no, he doesn't want to meet with you. He wants to meet with the director. Yeah. So Stephen King, anyway, Stephen King.
He's awesome.
Guys,
questions.
We actually only have time for probably one more question. I'm so sorry. I know we got another panel coming in very soon, so one more question.
So far, no one's really let us have it. Come on. This guy looks like he wants to let us have it back here.
I have the mic, though.
Oh, who's got the
waiting
mic?
to meet him my entire
By the way,
life.
Shit.
by the way,
Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Something
a Dharma
tells me.
shirt.
Yeah, the Dharma jumpsuit's not going to let us have it.
Yeah.
Or
And
is it?
besides, we have the same birthday. Thank you so much for returning the Star Trek card, and I hope you liked yours for your birthday.
I very much did. Thank you.
How does it feel to be the show that people compare other shows to? I mean, you treated us like intelligent human beings, and you didn't give us the answers all at once, and everything is like, oh, it's okay, but it's no Lost. So how does it feel to be the game changer?
I think she's asking me about my MTV show, The Hard Times of R.J. Berger.
Of course, but
Oh.
Damon, if you could talk about Lost too when he's done.
Oh, sorry. Okay, you could take it first, Damon.
First off, thank you for that enormously flattering question. And I think it's very surreal because the thing is, when we created that show, it happened so fast that we didn't have time to think. And I really believe that if we had had 6 months to cook it, it never would have worked, because that sort of terror and lack of time forced us to make decisions that we probably wouldn't have made because they weren't the smart decisions, but it also forced us to try something new. And since the show started and it was successful, or it became zeitgeisty, a lot of shows have been branded with that idea of like, oh, this could be the next Lost. But I've always felt that was an unfair sort of way of putting those shows in a corner, because what made Lost was that it didn't feel like anything that you could had seen before. And for us as writers, we were like, shit, please let us rip off something. Like, we just, like, every single episode was blank whiteboard. But I feel like there are a number, for me, a show like Lost is, A, it's original, B, there are moments that happen in it that make you want to reach out and talk to other people when it's over. There you go. So I think shows like, Breaking Bad or The Wire, or Game of Thrones, Two Broke Girls, The Bachelor, but all of these shows live in this sort of zeitgeisty, unique space that create communities around them, and that's why Carlton and I, for the last Lost panel that was in Hall H, the night before, people were starting to line up for it. And we were like, let's just go check out the line. And it was just so amazing that these people were like watching this thing that we were doing. It was really a transcendent experience. And as much as I'll be writing movies and television until they won't let me do it anymore. But I know that there will never be another experience or another show like that show. And I know that that's going to be the first word next to my name when I die, Lost. And I couldn't be more grateful that that's the case. So thank you, and to everyone else like you.
ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Damon and Seth. Damon and
Thanks,
Seth.
guys. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more time for Damon and Seth. Keep it up. Come on. Give them that love. I'll see you over here. Thank you. Thank you so much. Guys, thank you so much. Did you enjoy that panel? Do you feel like you learned a little bit about the writing process in Hollywood through that panel? It's not always what you think. That's one of the biggest things you got to remember. There's so many moving parts. Thank you so much for your time that you spent with us today. Is anybody coming to any more panels today? I friggin' love you guys. Is anybody coming to panels tomorrow? I love you guys. I'm Zachary Levi, and I'm walking off the stage now. Goodbye.